Hi, everyone. Welcome back. For those of you who were here for the 9 a.m. session, welcome back. Really appreciate you. For those who are here for the 10 o'clock, thank you for coming. We're here to listen to Dr. Linda Hagedorn speak about performing the impossible, the ways that education can change destiny. Just so y'all know, everybody is muted for right now, will remain muted until the question and answer portion. You are welcome to put questions in the question section. So I see that Anna and Jeanette already posted hello, and thank you very much. There's also a chat function, so I'll be posting some links throughout the presentation. So for example, I've already posted the link in case anybody is interested in receiving credit from UT Austin for participating in these webinars and things like that. If you have any questions about the UT credit, please reach out to Dr. Chavez or to Juan Iga in particular. And so I'll go ahead and get started. Our speaker today is Linda Sarah Hagedorn, who is a former Associate Dean of Undergraduate Programs, International Programs, Student Services, Diversity, and Community in the College of Human Sciences, and she's also Professor Emeritus in the School of Education at Iowa State University. She's a very prominent researcher in the area of community college student success with over 200 publications and presentations. She recently was the director of international programs at Iowa State and has been highly involved in international education. Dr. Hagedorn has extensive international experience, beginning with her initial work in Vietnam as a Fulbright specialist at Annyeong University in 2003. She subsequently has been a researcher and collaborator in China, Russia, Korea, and Spain. She's on the advisory board of international universities in both China and Iran. As a past president of the Association for the Study of Higher Education and vice president of the American Educational Research Association, Dr. Hagedorn has a rich history of leadership. I'll just add, she's also been the past president of the Council for the Study of Community Colleges, which is an organization very near and dear to my heart. Included on her list of funded projects included the latest funded by the U.S. Department of State, where she leads the American Cultural Center at Henan Normal School in Xizang, China. So I will go ahead and hand it over to Dr. Linda Hagedorn.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you very much, Erin. And it's really my privilege to speak to this group. I'm hoping you can see my screen now. Yes?
Yes, we sure can.
Okay. Perfect. Okay. I've entitled my presentation on performing the impossible, because I think that's what community college professionals do every day, is perform the impossible. And since we're really talking specifically about developmental ed and remediation and those types of topics, performing the impossible really comes under that heading of changing lives and creating new destinies. So I see you as my superheroes, and that's the purpose of that screenshot that you're seeing. All right, I want us to think about changing destinies. Now on the screen, you're seeing two sets of children, born in different places, born to different types of families and different SES, but you can imagine that the futures of these children are highly likely to be very different. Who's going to lead a better life? Who has more opportunities? You know, we're all brought into this world with a likelihood. It's not written in stone, perhaps, but for many, it's pretty much written with indelible ink. Our destiny can be defined by gender. It is defined by gender, race, socioeconomic status, the parents to whom we are born, or the location of our birth, and on and on. It's written for us, and although it can change, it's difficult to do and requires strength, determination, and most importantly, human assistance. So thinking about this destiny situation, certainly destinies can be changed. And typical ways, or some of the ways that destiny can be changed, is if you win the lottery. That'll change a life and that'll change a destiny. You can also change your destiny by marrying royalty or abandoning it or making it big in Hollywood. And all of those scenarios could be assigned to Meghan Markle. You could also change your destiny if you become a professional athlete or become a world-class model. But the truth is that the likelihood of any of these happening is pretty minuscule. And there is really very little that one can do to make it happen. But there's another way to change destinies that's more of a sure thing, or something that actually is in the hands of the individual, and that is through education. Education, specifically getting a college degree, remains the best odds of entering the middle class and entering destinies. And I'm going to assume that that's the case with many of you in the audience today. I was asked to share a little bit about my own journey, and I'd like to do that if I can. There's me at about age 3 or 4, born in Chicago, to a factory worker and with an 8th grade education, an immigrant. My mother had a 10th grade education, also an immigrant, into a family with some domestic violence. Education was my solace in life. I really enjoyed going to school and attended in the Chicago public schools, which, if you are familiar at all, know that at least back in the time when I was a student there, the Chicago public schools did not have the best reputation for the best of education. After graduating high school, I wanted to go to college, but my parents, specifically my father, didn't think that that would make any sense for a girl. And there was no money in the house for that. And so, knowing I had to work my own way through college, I did go to Triton Community College in River Grove, Illinois. And it was through that college that really changed my life. And I'll just jump ahead just a bit. I majored in electronics technology in a vocational program, actually. And it was about 8 years after I graduated from Triton that I was hired by Triton to be a community college instructor, again in electronics technology. And that was during a time when there were very few females. The majority of my students were males in electronics, and I was still relatively young when I started that role. I eventually made my way up to a department chair, working at Triton. I'll jump way ahead and say at the age of about 39, I decided that I perhaps wanted to go further in my community college career and decided to look into a PhD program that might lead to becoming a community college president. I enrolled at the University of Illinois at Chicago. At that time, I had 4 children. I'll get into that a little bit. But in a higher education program, again, with the goal of returning to the community college. I graduated on my 43rd birthday. And there I am with one of my children, my son Aaron, who graduated high school on the exact same day of my graduation, getting my PhD. So you see us together. It was a really proud moment for both of us and a real destiny changer. I will jump ahead. After graduating, I did not go into the community college presidency, but was rather kind of caught the research bug and received my first faculty position at the University of Southern California in Los Angeles, where I served for 10 years. After that, I was recruited to the University of Florida, serving there about 5 years, again, all in higher education and chairing community college leadership programs. And then from there went on to Iowa State University, returning back to the Midwest, back to my roots, where I served until I recently retired as a professor of higher ed and the associate dean in the College of Human Sciences. I was also a mother and grandmother, and am a mother and grandmother. On the screen now, the top middle picture is my family. This was in the early 80s. That's my blended family. You see 4 children who have grown up, and you'll see each of them in various spots there on the screen. Education changed my destiny, And it also changed the destiny of my children, all four of whom have gone to college. Actually, two of them have a PhD. Our eldest, Bill, is a faculty member at the University of Central Florida. My son, Aaron, who got his high school degree the same day I graduated with my PhD, is an assistant dean at the University of Texas at Arlington. So he's in Texas. And my other two children are also have college degrees as well. And that's me today. That's a very recent picture with my dear husband of close to 40 years now. And both of us have seen education as destiny changers. Okay, so I want you to think about destiny and think about your destiny. Think about your earliest experiences with education and how education may have changed your life. And I want you to think also about the role that education played, not just for you, but also for your students. What are their destinies? How has education, or how could education, specifically a community college education, change their destiny? But what is preventing students from entering the middle class or changing their destinies? And what is preventing them from a college degree? Many community college students enter the community college like I did, seeking change or maybe looking for a do-over. But poverty, racial status, disabilities, learning disabilities, mental health issues, hunger, domestic violence, etc., can be major barriers that are difficult to prevent. But one of the largest barriers to getting a college degree has been traditional mathematics remediation. The number one reason for students, number one academic reason preventing students from getting a college degree has been mathematics, passing that first college level mathematics course. Now, is this a new problem? Obviously not. It's been almost 400 years we have had a similar debate over what challenges underprepared students. The argument goes, should higher education be reserved for the academically superior students? Or should access be given to a broad array of individuals whose inclusion will serve to further advance the needs of an increasingly complex society? The truth is that DevEd courses are offered by 76% of all higher education institutions. That's 4-year, 2-year, all institutions. So the majority offer remedial instruction. 94% of all institutions, again, that's 2-year and 4-year together, with high enrollments of students of color, offer remedial education. And the truth is almost all community colleges offer developmental ed of some kind. So 400 years. Why haven't we found a silver bullet that remediates or that solves the issue of remediation? We just haven't done it. If anything, we now know that there is no silver bullet. But like the proverbial fountain of youth, we continue to seek that silver bullet, or we continue to seek the solution. We pretty much have decided or have known that there is no real fountain of youth. But we do know that we can extend lives with healthy eating, avoidance of tobacco, exercise, etc. So while there is no silver bullet, we have found ways to improve the situation. And that's where we are with remedial instruction and the DevEd models. We're seeking the best, knowing that it's never going to be the proverbial cure-all. So let me take you into the theory that's driving traditional remediation. Students lacking college-level skills can be on an equal footing with other students by passing a remedial course. Once remediated, students can compete with their college-ready counterparts. That's the theory. You have to buy into that to believe that remediation is going to work at all. If these assumptions are wrong, there can never be a method that can eradicate remediation. But what is missing here in the theory is that students bring their histories. They bring their predicted destinies with them. Often this may include a failure to thrive in K-12 education, perhaps a dislike of formal education, and feelings of low self-esteem, self-doubt, and vestiges from their actual destinies. So what have we tried? Well, typically the pilot high and deep model. And what I mean by that is various levels of daisy chaining of remedial courses. So this is a set of courses and levels that was previously used at the Los Angeles Community College districts in terms of remediating mathematics deficient students. So the lowest level or the deepest level of remediation, they had courses like World of Numbers, Math Fundamentals, Arithmetic. And if you pass through that, you could go on to level 1, which was I called basic, which is just elementary algebra or basic elementary algebra. And if you pass through that, you go to level 2 into intermediate algebra. And then after passing through all 3 of those levels, you can go into the transfer level. Now, certainly students could be placed in any one of these levels depending on placement tests. However, the majority of students started at level 0. The problem with this is it's linear. And since you can only take one of these courses per semester, it would take a complete 2 years to get to college, to pass college algebra, assuming that you took one of these every semester and passed it the first time, which I will say is a rare event. There's the leaky pipe problem of students just not progressing, failing in a level and just deciding to quit and not go on. And a real big issue is until students pass through level 2, they really probably they could not take college level courses. And so their degrees were postponed. And of course, we know many of them were discouraged and never made it. I did a major project with the Los Angeles Community College District about 15 years ago that was called the Transfer and Retention of Urban Community College Students. And then we saw that the proportion or the percentage of students who made it from level 0 through level 3 was 17%. Now you could challenge that and say, wow, 17%, that's not very much. Or you could say, wow, starting with students who had to start with arithmetic or the World of Numbers that talked about the decimal system and what a fraction is, all the way through to passing college algebra, that 17% isn't too bad. But so I guess it's your perspective. But the truth is that this type of remediation typically is not or cannot reach a large number of students. And what I have on the screen now is from a larger study of developmental education. And you see from starting out with 10 students here at the top in blue, the blue representing students who enrolled and completed the course, the orange, those who did not complete the course, and the white, who did not enroll or stopped enrolling. Going through the first course from 10, we're down to 5. The second, we're down to 2.5. The third semester, 1.5. And passing the gateway course, at least in this study, was only 1. So they had a 10% success rate. And the conclusion, many more students quit than fail, and that type of system is broken. We can't continue with this type of structure, and we must do better. So we've tried many different things in addition to the pilot higher and deeper model. We've played along with what I'm going to call the course duration shuffle. We have compressed developmental ed courses, changing them from 8-week rather than 16 weeks. So we have compressed the amount of time and the expectation that students can get through quicker. We've also expanded in some cases, or tried the expansion model, where you would take a course and divide it over 2 semesters instead of 1, so it takes even longer, but assuming that students needed more time to digest. Now, in both of these types of models, or in this course duration shuffle, there has been some success for some students, but it's been low, and about at the same amount that we've seen reported earlier, or in like my Los Angeles study, between 17 and 20% of students might get through the college level course. We tried other things too in terms of reforms. We've played with assessment and placement by changing testing, experimenting with cut scores, making them higher or lower to get into remediation or to go on to the college level courses. We've also tried multiple or different measures to assess where students should be placed. We've seen reforms in curriculum, such as combining reading and writing into a single course, or changing math, or changing alternatives to college level math, substituting for algebra, college algebra, a statistics course, or a course entitled quantitative reasoning, all of which were a little different than that algebra model. Some success. We've also had seen reforms in enhancing advising and support, adding such things as learning communities, or mandatory tutoring, or additional supports to help students get through that remediation. There's been some success for some students, but few are successful and very few earn a degree. There's been other attempts at remediation, or helping students to get to college level. There have been measures to reduce the number of DevEd levels. My 0 through 3 level I had on the screen earlier, in many cases was reduced down to maybe 2 levels rather than 4. We've played with mandating tutoring, linear math lab programs, summer bridge programs, getting students between high school graduation and first semester in college ready. There's been some experimentation with single-sex courses, and of course, playing with online and blended courses. These types of attempts at remediation have been implemented as standalone programs or as add-ons, or using many of them together, kind of a variation of that pilot high and deeper. There's been some success for some students, but it has not, none of these variations really changed the abysmal rates that we have seen specifically with math remediation. So despite all the efforts and science, nothing has really succeeded in large measure. The costs have been very, very high. We know that 68% of all community college students have enrolled in at least one remediate or DevEd course at a cost of approximately $7 billion. Has it been a failure? Well, it's up to the observer again. But we know that from national tests that approximately 20%, or 17% as I found in my own research, but approximately 20% of math traditional course-based DevEd students will ever complete a college-level math course. So that means that 80% have failed to do so. Let's switch a second and look at DevEd specifically in your state, Texas, which I have to admit has been one of the most active states, or the most active state, in confronting these issues. We'll start with 2009, when the state added DevEd support outside of classrooms. Then in 2013, co-requisites were first introduced through SB 162. And you're probably familiar with the Texas Success Initiatives, or the TSI. SB 162 allowed institutions a lot of flexibility with respect to design of different ways to identify who will receive co-requisites. In 2013, there was work in common standards for college readiness. And here with the Texas Success Initiative Assessment, or TSIA, was first introduced. And the idea of the bubble range, where there was a range of students who were below college ready but eligible for accelerated DevEd options. That brings us to 2015, where the state then concentrated on holistic advising, on use of multiple measures in addition to the TSIA for DevEd placement. And most recently, the 2017 co-requisite requirement. And the word here is requirement. Although co-requisites were introduced in the state in 2011, they were not required. The latest legislation, HB 2223, again, the co-requisite requirement, the definition being of co-enrolled or concurrently enrolled in a DevEd course and the entry-level first-year course of the same subject matter within the same semester. So, the idea of co-requisites. And through a series of state mandated requirements, beginning in fall of 2018, 25% of all students requiring DevEd had to be enrolled in a co-rec model, 50% by the fall of 2019, and this coming fall of 2020, 75% of DevEd students must be in a co-requisite model. And this is with a variety of other supports as well, scaling the use of supplementary instruction, some tutoring, technology enhancement, and other options. So that's where you find yourself today. So let's take a little bit of a backtrack and see why we're doing, why is your state doing that? And what did we learn? What do we learn from the research? Is co-requisites going to be that silver bullet? Is it going to be the fountain of youth for DevEd? Well, what does the research tell us? And what are the origins of this type of instruction? The history of co-rec begins with an instructor by the name of Peter Adams. He was an English and writing instructor from the Community College of Baltimore County, who played with this traditional co-requisite model of the credit course and the DevEd course being offered during the same semester and taken concurrently. But specifically, Peter Adams created what is called the Accelerated Learning Program, or ALP. The original model was developed using students in developmental writing. Now that's really important to know because it's not math, it was writing. And what Peter Adams did was he would start with a group of 10 DevEd students and 10 college level students. And he would mix them together in one class of 20, and he would teach them college writing. But the 10 DevEd students received an additional 3 hours per week of support. The findings? Well, that the co-rec students were 36% more likely to complete a college level course and 6% more likely to persist into a second year of college. Now that's, again, with writing. And you could look at those numbers and say, wow, or you could look at those numbers and say, gee. But the truth is there was little research done in the math co-rec side. How does this work? And specifically, what happens when there's deeper levels of DevEd required than just the types of students that Peter Adams experimented with and continued to work with. The ALP model is used a lot in community colleges across the country, and it has been extended to include mathematics. Let's look at some of the national research. Where does this come from? What do we know? Well, there was a very controversial study in 2012 that concluded that approximately half of all students placed into remedial education could have passed a college level course if just given the opportunity. In other words, not even use DevEd, just stick them right into the college level course. Scott Clayton and others suggested using multiple measures for identification of students who truly need remediation from those who could get by without it. Then there was a randomized control trial of DevEd students taking statistics plus a support workshop, kind of like what Peter Adams had. But note, this is what I would call a double barrel study. They were looking at two things. What happens if we substitute statistics for algebra? Oh, and we also add a support workshop in addition to it. And so that combination was found to have students passing at a rate of 16 percentage points higher than those who were assigned to algebra. They accumulated more credits, and a majority of the enrolled statistics students actually passed the course. So that's some of the background of how this co-requisite model was conceived. Now, in your state, there was a big Department of Education, U.S. Department of Education test and research called the Texas Co-Requisite Study. And it was a U.S. Department of Education reading and writing, DevEd support with a college level English course. And this was over the time span of fall 2016 to 2018. So this is very, very recent. And they did a randomized control trial. Now, a randomized control trial is the strictest and the most stringent type of research model. And they use the community colleges that you see, a sample of students from the community colleges that you see on your screen there. They also did a statewide implementation study, which a little less stringent, but included all of the community colleges, again, using, good research control models to find out what's happening in Texas and what is the success of the, specifically here, reading and writing DevEd models. They use interviews, surveys, documents to find there is no one single flavor of co-requisite model in your state or other states either. There is the paired course type of model with designated DevEd and college level courses. 3 credit hours each, same students in both sections, but not mixed with college level students. In other words, we start out with your students requiring a DevEd. They have 2 classes. They have their DevEd class and their college level course as the same students in both classes. Then we have extended instruction time. In this model, the DevEd students are mixed in a class with college level students, but the DevEd students have an extension or an extra 1 credit course to kind of help them get through that college level course. So they have extended instructional time that the college level students do not have. Then there is the technology mediated support. Here, the DevEd students, in addition to their college level course, also have assigned computer adaptive model. So the technology really serves as the DevEd course and the support structure to help them get through the college level course. Then there is the accelerated learning program, very similar to what we talked about earlier that Peter Adams designed. Here we have students that are mixed, DevEd students mixed with the college level. There is DevEd support structured classroom just for them. Low student instructor ratios. There would only be 20 students in the college level course and 10 in the support college level course, and the same instructor for both sections. And then finally, there is the academic support service model that would provide the DevEd students with mandatory academic support services like the Writing Center and tutoring, and that serves as their DevEd source for help through navigating through the college level course. So we talk about co-requisite model, it isn't always the same thing for every college or for even every student requiring that type of instruction. So what was the results of this Texas study? Well, there are some results from 2018. The co-requisite models are associated with higher first college level course completion. Also found that the percent of students completing a first level course in math increased from, now listen to these numbers, increased from 3.1% in the fall of 2017 to 13.3% in the fall of 2018, and from 5.9% to 19.6% in reading and writing. Now let's look at that objectively. Let's look at those numbers. When you look at 3.1% to 13.3%, you got to say, wow, that's a big, big jump. It's about 4 times as much. But you also have to say that it's a move from abysmal to, well, certainly not satisfactory. It's better described maybe as satisficing, better, but certainly not optimal. And even the increase in writing from 5.9% to 19.6%. So that's over three times as well. Still, is that acceptable? Well, for one thing, it's not the silver bullet. The study found some real challenges to the implementation of the co-rec model. One of the biggest was buy-in. Buy-in from faculty, advisors, and students and other stakeholders. There were perceptions that the co-requisites might devalue the DevEd experience. They also found problems and challenges with scheduling, because each of these courses, especially when you're talking about the same students in 2 different courses at during the same semester, require student schedules to be pretty open. They also found limited preparation and support for model design and instruction. In other words, kind of a lack of faculty development and training. And there was a rapid speed of and uncertainty around state policy making. So, you know, the state of Texas makes a lot of decisions, and they come fast. And so some of the challenges to implementation were that faculties and others were saying, wow, well, this is happening today, what's going to happen tomorrow? And just not feeling very comfortable. There was also a lack of interest that was identified among specifically the college level faculty. Advisors often felt underinformed of how the model worked, why it worked, and who should be included. There were great challenges, as I indicated earlier, to the scheduling processes and how these co-rec and co-courses during the same semester could interwork with a schedule where a student had to take other courses as well and then kind of fit it in. And certainly could be very difficult for part-time students who could only take a limited number of hours per semester. There were also challenges to instructor loads, because in many cases the instructors were teaching the same students in 2 different courses, and so there were some issues there. So that was your study in Texas. Now you could also learn from other states. Now another state that has instigated and has been working very deeply in co-requisite model is the state of Tennessee. And Tennessee, like Texas, has also had state mandates regarding co-requisites. And studies in Tennessee, which have been going on a little bit longer, found that by the end of the 3rd year, students requiring deeper levels of DevEd math earned 6 fewer college level credits than college-ready counterparts. And students requiring shallow remediation earned 3 levels fewer college level credits. But when we look at the rate of college and gateway course completion, and you can see the table there on the right-hand side of your screen, in terms of math, there was a 12% of the students in the prerequisite model. So in other words, that would be remediation 1 semester, college level the next. But in the co-requisite model, they saw a 51% rate of completion in the gateway or college level course. In terms of writing, in the prerequisite model, it was 31%, but in the co-requisite model, 59%. So at least the evidence from the Tennessee is that co-req has had some fairly substantial and promising results. So with that in mind, is co-requisites our silver bullet? Well, obviously not. It's not, but it is promising. And testing is really lagging. Despite the research that I've cited, there really has been a low level of true testing of this model and ways to improve it. Another thing that's left off of our discussion of co-requisite model is the psychological effects or the psychosocial effects of being a developmental or remedial student. We know that students requiring DevEd may have a lowered level of self-esteem. There's always that underlying message of failure when you're identified as a student who's not at college level. And progressing through remedial classes can produce a lack of esteem and motivation to continue. There are also issues with stereotype vulnerability. Studies by Steele and others have found that students in stigmatized groups will achieve lower scores on tests and other progress monitoring assessments as a result of being included in a group that is expected to achieve less. So you tell students that they're DevEd, that they're not at college level math, and you stick them in a college level math course, and guess what? They're going to think, well, gee, I'm not going to be very good at this. There's also increased frustration and decreased motivation among this group because requiring students to or having students in DevEd levels increases time to degree and transfer. And the co-req model does increase time to degree because even though they may be at in the same semester, there's a limited number of course and credits that they can take. So it may take them longer than the proverbial 2-year college, which we all know is a misnomer. But if you require any level of DevEd, the idea of getting through in 2 years full time is not possible. And being in a DevEd course or courses may lead to withdrawal from college. So that psychosocial, that is really something to consider. There's also the whole expectation of DevEd in general. And the idea of DevEd is to completely erase any issues that students might have had even though they may have experienced 12 years of less than optimal type of experiences in the education system. They may have been identified as not good at math or not a good writer or reader. And the expectation of one semester or two or whatever in a community college is completely eradicating and erasing that situation. It just doesn't seem to be very realistic. The models also, especially in math remediation specifically, doesn't account for math anxiety, which is a real thing. And there's been a lot of research on math anxiety, and estimates of about 50% of Americans suffer from it. Adults with math anxiety are really less likely to show interest, enter, and succeed in STEM careers. And we also know that math anxiety can be identified very early in life. We don't know if being bad at math causes math anxiety, or if having math anxiety makes people to perform poorly at math. It's probably likely that it's a double arrow in a feedback loop, that being bad at math causes math anxiety causes people to be bad at math, and the circle continues. So what have we learned about co-requisites from all of this? Well, we've learned that it's promising, that through a co-requisite model, students can see the light. They can see the end of a law of developmental ed courses where the pilot, higher, and deeper model just left a very long pathway ahead of them. Students can earn college level credits quicker. We've learned that the research provides evidence of positive outcomes, not extraordinary, but positive. We've also learned that there are many barriers, and here's what we need to think about. We need to find ways to delete these barriers. There are many logistic problems, time issues, course passing issues, and by that I mean, I work with several community colleges throughout the country. I work with the Achieving the Dream initiative, and there have been several colleges that have raised the issues. Well, what happens to a student who, in a co-rec model, passes the college level course, but fails the Dev Ed course that's tied with it? Is that sufficient? Do they have to take the Dev Ed course again? There are also barriers with people and teaching style issues. When you require in one model of the co-rec of two faculty members working together, one teaching one section and another teaching the other, there may be some teaching style issues. There's certainly less instructor autonomy, and there has also been some barriers in terms of buy-in. There's also strategies. We must have strategies in place. We know that. There needs to be time for design, to design these types of models, and professional development to help faculty and advisors and others to be able to work better within this model. There definitely needs to be small class sizes so that students get the attention that they require, and attention to the psychosocial issues. This is not just an academic problem. So this is my last slide. You have been asked to perform the impossible, to somehow magically change students who have experienced failure or lack of success in college level types of courses to suddenly become achievers and success stories. Will we ever be able to perform this impossible? Well, we know there are no silver bullets or vaccines to eradicate developmental needs. Community colleges will continue to serve as the main source for developmental education. We also know that the number of students requiring Dev Ed will likely not significantly decrease despite early efforts, including dual enrollment. We also know that despite a robust system and gallant efforts, co-requisite instruction alone or paired with other intrusive methods will never produce 100% success. We know that. We must accept that. The bottom line is that we are building the bike as we ride it. With the current knowledge and light that we have, co-rec is the best we have. And it depends on you, the superheroes, to continue to change the destinies and perform what seem to be the impossible. We can do it. Our goal is to affect all students, and it can only be done with your assistance. Co-requisite education will expand and will receive research scrutiny and challenge. It will evolve, it will change, and it will improve. As I said earlier, it's the best we have right now, but it's not static, it's dynamic. So with that, I want to thank you. I want to thank you specifically for being those superheroes and for believing in the students that you have. You know, there's a saying that we have to teach the students we have, not the students we wish we had. And I'm sure you can relate to that. And I'm sure you're doing your miracles every day. And so I want to thank you. And with that, I will close out my presentation and thank you for your participation and for your interest.
Thank you so much, Linda. So now we have about 9 minutes, maybe a little bit less for questions. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute folks so that anybody who wants to jump in and ask questions. I will say from the questions and answers, I did want to share that we had a few people, Hike Young, Jeanette, all saying thank you very much for sharing your story, that they found it very inspirational. And I think people are likely feeling very uplifted by this right now, especially with where we're at with the COVID-19 outbreak and the rush to put things online. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone. And then if folks have any questions, they are welcome to ask. Okay, I hope that worked. Okay, that doesn't seem to be working. So Mario Morin did write, thank you, Dr. Hagedorn. Lori Coleman mentioned thank you. This was very informative. David, it looks like you had a question. Maybe not. Oh, okay. All right.
Yes, it's working now, I think.
Youngwee, I think you had a question?
Oh, yes. Can you hear me? I think you did unmute. Yes?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. First, I'd like to say that, yes, this was wonderful. It was very informative and very inspirational. And I know that Professor Hagedorn mentioned that a lot more research needs to be done, that this hasn't really been studied very well. But I just wondered if in that research that she was presenting to us, where she talked about the 4 different types of cohort models that I guess we're implementing in Texas. Did the research look into which ones were possibly more successful? Like, was it the paired or the extended or the accelerated?
Yeah, there were positive outcomes really from all of them, but the ones that seem to have the most promise are those with the most human interaction. Mm-hmm. And by that I mean where they're not the technology, the one where the technology served as the only dev ed module. The ALP model is probably the one that has received the most attention and does seem to be the most promising. And that's where the students are mixed with the college level students. And then they also get that additional extra class. That one requires the same students exist in both of those 2 courses. It has some logistic issues as well. And also, since the original ALT model was limited to 20 students, 10 developmental and 10 college level, you can see that it's also an expensive model. And then that second course has to go with just the 10. And some, not all students stay the entire semester. So the numbers can dwindle rather quickly. So it's a rather expensive model. So that type of human interaction where there is an instructor who teaches both in the college level, the same instructor in the dev ed, that also seems to have better research results, that the students are better to interact with just one instructor rather than two, who, when there's two, sometimes there isn't 100% agreement perhaps. So that would be the probably the one type has the best outcome. But there hasn't really been a real stringent study of those different types to identify, which one does statistically better than the other. A lot of this is anecdotal or based on, well, this particular model had a 14% rate of success and this other one had a 16% rate. So the 16 is better than 14. Let's go with it. When in fact, it may just be some statistical noise going on in the background.
Okay, thank you. Mario, it looks like you had a question.
Hi, yes, Linda. Thank you so much for joining us. It is always a pleasure to learn from you. We have an issue with some classes that have the half the debit and then the correct, and we have situations where students fail the debit but pass the correct. What do you think about how that could be addressed in the future? Do you think that the student that failed the debit part has to retake that class, or because they passed the correct, they should be okay and on their way?
Yeah, this is a real conundrum. Because if you say that they failed the dev ed section, but they passed the correct, that they can continue to go on, then you are really saying that dev ed piece is not important. On the other hand, make students take a course, the dev ed course specifically, in which they've already have exhibited that they could be successful without it, doesn't make sense either. I think this is more of a grading issue than a policy. In other words, giving two different grades maybe doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Maybe one grade for the combination might be something that is important. And the students understand the system. They understand that if they can pass the college level, that they probably didn't need the dev ed. At least that's what they may think. So they just don't bother doing the homework on that side. They do the homework on the other side, on the college level. So maybe, combining those into one big credit might be one way of that the students have to pass this entire section in order to move on. Another way might be to play with the pass-fail and use the pass-fail on the dev ed side, and maybe not necessarily on the college level, but just kind of acknowledging that if students can pass the college level, then maybe they really didn't need that dev ed side. So I mean that's just my opinion here. I think the issue needs to be attacked more at how we grade students, or how we consider what is passed and versus not passed, and the students have a better understanding of what it means to actually pass this block.
Do you foresee at the national level there been a recommendation to be more standard in terms of how the options are provided, not just statewide, but even within institution? There's so much variation as to how it's implemented that it makes it problematic when you're trying to collect data.
Absolutely. I mean, this is a problem at all institutions, not just community colleges. faculty typically have a lot of autonomy. Community college faculty have much less autonomy than four-year institution faculty, but still, nonetheless, they're, people have different teaching styles. People have go about teaching their course very, very differently. Standardization, if we know what works, once we know what works, we need to have that be the model. And there is a requirement for more standardization. You do see that more in your state than in other places. This whole mandating of the co-rec model is a step in that direction. But if we know what's right, if we know what helps students, we are irresponsible in not giving students that particular type of instruction. We are moving into a realm of greater standardization rather than less. And so I think you're going to see more and more of that.
Great, thank you. So we are at 12 o'clock. So I have a couple of questions that I got in the question and answer pane from Mario and from Jeanette. Dr. Hagedorn, would you mind if I email those to you, and then I can share those out with the group at a later date, just since we're out of time?
Absolutely.
All right, thank you. Thank you very much. It just, in reading the feedback, it seems like people were really touched by your story and very uplifted. So thank you very much for that.
Thank you. Thank you. My pleasure.
Okay, friends. So we will go ahead and transition to the noon session. So I'm going to go ahead and end this webinar, and then we can switch over to the noon session. So thank you again very, very much, Dr. Hagedorn. It was a pleasure to learn from you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye, Linda.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Awesome.